The desert sun was sinking behind the serrated teeth of the Dragoon Mountains when lone rancher Jacob Warren rode farther north than he ever had any business going, following nothing but a troubling rumor drifting through frontier towns, a rumor that 7 Apache girls had been taken by a rogue band of scalp hunters who'd split from their own commander and begun acting as mercenaries for anyone with a grudge against the tribes. Jacob, a quiet man who'd never believed in taking sides except with justice, felt something clawing at his chest ever since he heard it. He'd seen too many innocents crushed between the endless feuds of settlers and tribes, too many young ones who never had a chance to understand why grown men needed to destroy each other. As dusk crawled in, he spotted a flicker of movement near a grove of dead pines, and when he rode closer, he froze at the sight that would haunt him forever. 7 young Apache girls, tied by their wrists to a thick branch, hanged but still clinging to the faintest sparks of life, their bodies limp but twitching, their breaths shallow and fading. It didn't matter who they were or where they came from, no human deserved this. Jacob leapt from his horse with a fury that pushed aside all fear, slashing the ropes with his hunting knife, lowering each girl to the ground one by one, whispering to them that they were safe now, though he wasn't yet sure it was true. He made a quick campfire, wrapped them in every spare blanket he carried, and poured precious drops of water onto their lips. 2 were conscious enough to look at him with wide, terrified eyes, and one whispered in broken English that the men who did this would return by sunrise. Jacob knew he had only a few hours to move them, but something about their condition told him they wouldn't survive being dragged across the rough terrain. So instead of fleeing, he prepared for the storm that was coming. As he loaded his rifle, the oldest girl, maybe 18, with strong cheekbones and a streak of defiance even in her weakened state, mustered enough strength to whisper the truth. Those men weren't just hunting for money, they were clearing the land for a secret deal between a corrupt mining company and a rogue officer in the Territorial Army, a deal that required pushing out the Apache families who still lived near the Silver Ridge. Killing the 7 girls wasn't just cruelty, it was a message, a spark meant to ignite all-out war so the army could justify seizing the territory entirely. Jacob felt heat in his chest, the kind that came from oldest anger, the kind he hadn't felt since the day he lost his own sister to raiders years ago. He vowed, right there in the dead pine grove, that he would not let these girls die or let this plot unfold. He moved them behind a cluster of rocks, set his horse loose farther down the ridge as a decoy, and waited. Midnight came cold and silent until a faint crunch of gravel carried through the air, then another, then the sound of 6 horses approaching. Jacob could see the silhouettes of men with rifles slung lazily over their shoulders, laughing among themselves as if returning to check the condition of livestock, not children. He steadied his breath, sighted his rifle, and when the leader halted right beneath the shattered branch where the girls had been, Jacob squeezed the trigger. The crack split the night, and the leader fell without a sound. The others scattered, shouting, ducking for cover, firing blindly into the darkness. Jacob rolled behind a boulder, firing again, hitting one man's shoulder and sending another stumbling backward. The gunfight turned into a swirling dance of muzzle flashes and echoing thunder, and though Jacob was just one man, he fought like he had 7 souls depending on him, because he did. After 20 brutal minutes, the ridge went silent except for the wind. Jacob approached cautiously. 3 men were dead, 2 wounded, 1 missing. He grabbed the least injured survivor by the collar and demanded the truth. Trembling, the men revealed the plot in full. The mining company planned to set fire to 2 nearby Apache villages at dawn to frame them for attacking settlers, making the army's retaliation seem justified. The hanged girls had been left as a distraction, bait to lure away any warriors who might have protected their families. Jacob's stomach turned. Dawn was only 4 hours away. He tied the men tightly, then raced back to the girls, lifting the lightest onto his horse and helping the others wrap their arms around the saddle. He knew they couldn't outrun time, but he also knew he didn't need to. He needed allies. And he knew exactly where to find them. South of the ridge, hidden beyond a narrow canyon, lived Chief Nanton and what remained of his decimated band. Jacob had traded with them for years, earning a fragile but real trust. When he rode into their camp carrying 7 near-dead daughters, the tribe erupted with wails and fury. Chief Nanton placed a hand on Jacob's shoulder, not in greeting but in a silent understanding. Betrayal this deep would not go unanswered. Men readied their horses, women tended to the girls, and Jacob explained everything he'd learned. Instead of rage consuming them blindly, Nanton made a plan. They would reach the villages before the fire starters did, hide the families in the canyon, then ambush the mercenaries. But Jacob, knowing humans can be unpredictable, insisted on riding ahead alone to intercept the missing outlaw, the one who'd fled the firefight, fearing he might already be reporting back to his employers. Jacob galloped through the plains like a man possessed, each hoofbeat pounding like a ticking clock. Twice he lost the trail, but he pushed on until he finally saw a lone figure riding toward the mining camp. Jacob didn't hesitate. He tackled the men off his horse, the two rolling across the dirt in a furious struggle, fists and knees slamming into ribs and jaw. The outlaw reached for his revolver, but Jacob slammed his palm onto the hammer, pinning it, then knocked the men out cold. With the last messenger stopped, Jacob stole his horse and raced for the mining camp. When he arrived, he found 50 barrels of kerosene stacked, dozens of torches prepared, and a handful of hired guns ready to ride. They hadn't expected anyone to find them. Jacob shot out the first torch and shouted that the Apache warriors were already coming. Panic rippled through the camp, and the men scattered like startled cattle. Before they regrouped, Chief Nanton and his warriors emerged from the hills, their horses thundering across the plain. The outlaws fired wildly, but the Apaches moved with precision, outmaneuvering them, driving them back. Jacob fought beside them, swinging his rifle like a club when the bullets ran dry, pushing toward the central tent where he suspected the corrupt officer was hiding. He burst inside and found Colonel Strickland, a man whose polished boots and calm demeanor looked out of place among the chaos, holding a contract showing joint ownership between the army official and the mining syndicate. Strickland reached for his pistol, but Jacob shot the weapon from his hand, grabbed him by the coat, and dragged him out in front of the warriors. Strickland screamed that the Apaches attacked first, that he was only enforcing order. Jacob threw the contract at his feet and shouted the truth for all to hear. The hired guns lowered their weapons as the realization sank in that they were pawns in a plan that would brand them murderers and bury them with the blame. The battlefield fell silent. Dawn finally rose, not to flames, but to justice. The villagers, hidden safely in the canyon, reunited with their daughters after hours of fear. The girls were weak but alive, wrapped in blankets, surrounded by their families. Nanton approached Jacob, placing a hand over his heart, a gesture of eternal respect. Jacob simply nodded, exhausted, covered in dirt and blood, but relieved beyond measure. What came next was unexpected. The captured mercenaries testified against the colonel, the mining operation was shut down by territorial authorities, and the Apache families were allowed safe passage deeper into their ancestral lands. Jacob returned to his ranch alone, but something in him had changed. He wasn't just a solitary rancher anymore, he was a man who stood between innocence and darkness, even when the odds said it was impossible. And as word of the battle spread across frontier towns, people whispered his name with a mix of awe and gratitude. But Jacob didn't care about fame. He only cared that 7 young girls who had been left to die were now alive, laughing again, healing slowly but surely. At night, when the wind swept across the plains, Jacob would sometimes hear echoes of that night, the gunfire, the shouts, the crackle of torches, and he would remind himself why he fought. Not for land. Not for glory. But to break the cycle of violence that had taken too many lives on both sides. To be the one man who refused to look away. And for those who heard this story told across saloons, over campfires, and through worn pages of old journals, there was always one message: in a world drowning in greed and cruelty, one act of courage can change the fate of many. And sometimes, all it takes is one lone rancher refusing to let evil win. And if you want more powerful Wild West stories like this, full of courage, mystery, and unforgettable twists, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories ride farther than ever.